Hello, I'm Jon Stapleton with CodeVA, and this is a quick tutorial on embedding with variables in Twine using the Chapbook story format. Let's jump right into it. I've got a story set up here, kind of like ready to go to demonstrate this concept. And this is what I'm doing here is I'm using a variable called fire, and the story shows has a fire in it, and as the reader visits different passages, the fire is going to change. So here, the fire variable starts with a value of roaring, and if I test my story, we see that value here in the bonfire passage. I'm using the fire value in a sentence. And then if I search for food, I visit this passage where the story describes searching for food. That's the search passage, and you can see in the search passage I have the computer modify the variable called fire and change its name to change its value to dying, so that when I return to the bonfire passage, when I click return to campsite, the sentence uses a new value. This is the idea of like modifying a variable. There's a video about that in the description that goes into a lot more detail. So if you are wondering how this works, if you want a little bit more explanation about this part of it, go check that out. Now, the concept I want to demonstrate here for you is called embedding with variables. So there's this thing you can do in Twine called embedding passages. So I'm going to make a new passage. I'm going to call it roaring. Which maybe is a hint as to what we're going to do. And I'll write some text in here. Say the fire is roaring. Great. So it says, the fire is roaring, licking the stones placed around the logs. You can feel the heat tickling your face and hands, even from across the clearing. That's my passage. And I can embed this passage into here if I would like. So like, this is a pretty terse sentence. So let me embed my passage, embed the roaring passage. Okay, so now if I go into this passage, you can see the story will use the content that I created in the roaring passage, and we get this little like dotted line connection, which shows that the roaring passage is embedded in the bonfire passage, right? So this is kind of useful in a lot of situations to, like, you know, if you have like long parts of your story, you want to separate it out and make sure like the passages aren't super long by themselves. That's a good way of kind of decomposing your story into different little pieces. But I can do this really cool thing with variables in this situation. I have this passage called roaring, and instead of using a string or like data in quotation marks, I can use the variable I declared at the beginning of the story. This variable is called fire and it has a value of roaring. So if I go in here and I replace the string roaring with the variable fire, then the computer is going to interpret this variable with its value, roaring, meaning that the story will that Twine will insert the passage that matches that value of that variable, in this case, roaring. So if I test from here, I start the story, you can see that it's still embedding that roaring passage, even though I'm using a variable instead of giving the name of the passage explicitly. And this is super, super cool because if you've watched that modifying variables tutorial, you know I can have the computer modify the value of the fire variable over time, meaning that instead of replacing one word, like you saw at the beginning of the video, I can have Twine replace an entire sentence, an entire passage. I can swap out an entire passage, which is very, very cool. Let me close out all these tabs. Let's add another passage. So the value that Twine changes the variable fire to is the string dying. So I need a passage called dying to match up with that variable name. Create new, kind of move it over here so it's organized nicely. Rename dying. And I'll make up some text to put in this passage. And I'm remembering that the story is going to take this content and embed it inside of that bonfire passage. Cool. So I have a new passage. The fire sputters, sending sparks and ash. This should be ash, not ask. Ash into the air. A trail of white smoke filters through the branches overhead. That's my new passage. And because the story is changing the value of that fire variable, the story will insert my new passage in this spot once I have the story, once I have the computer change the value of the fire variable. All right, so let's test this out. Test. Okay, so here we have the roaring passage. The fire is roaring, licking the stones. Because the value of the fire variable, which you can actually see up here because I'm in like the testing view, the variable fire has a value of roaring. If I search for food, though, the variable fire changes its value to dying, which means when I return to the bonfire passage uses different text in context. Very, very cool. This is a super, super powerful concept. I can add whatever I want to these passages. Like I could add an image. Like if I wanted to embed an image, which if you're curious about how this works, there's a video, I can link it in the description. Grab an image of a bonfire. Yeah, that looks roaring to me. I can actually throw this into the passage, and because the computer is going to insert all of the content in this passage into the bonfire, we get this really cool. Oh, I forgot to do my quotation marks. Let me fix that. Quotation marks. I'll come back and do alt text later. Yeah, there we go. So we get this really cool thing where I can kind of contain all of the information about the roaring fire. I can even add more links in here if I want to. There's a lot of stuff I can do by embedding this passage in here. So that is embedding with variables. Super, super powerful concept. If you have any questions about this stuff, if you run into any problems implementing this sort of thing, please let us know. Get in the comments of the video. We would love to help. There are a bunch of videos linked in the description to some of the concepts that I've mentioned in here that are like good to know about before you start embedding with variables. So check those out. If you want a text version of this tutorial with code that you can copy and paste with examples and screenshots, check out the Twine Trail Guide link in the description below that has that information for you. And check out the other tutorials in the Twine Trail Guide. There's lots of stuff in there that can help you write your stories with Twine. And with that, I think that's all I have. Good luck and happy coding.